This is the moment Benjamin Netanyahu realized he had run out of allies. This is the visual that is shaking the entire Middle East this morning. If you look at the skies over Ankara right now, you will see Turkish F-16 fighter jets circling in formation, each one capable of carrying the Gazap, a thermobaric bomb so powerful that military analysts are calling it the non-nuclear weapon of mass destruction. The imagery is not subtle, the message is not hidden, and the timing is deliberate. As of 9:37 a.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, April 15, 2026, Turkey has officially unveiled its most destructive conventional weapon, while simultaneously issuing a statement that stops just short of a declaration of war. Benjamin Netanyahu, already facing criminal indictment at home, international arrest warrants from The Hague, and the collapse of his governing coalition, has just been blindsided by what sources inside the Israeli Defense Forces are calling the single most dangerous escalation in the region since the Yom Kippur War. In this deep dive, we are going to reveal the private conversations happening inside Netanyahu's bunker right now, expose why Turkey chose this exact moment to make this threat, show you the financial markets that are already responding to this crisis, and explain why 3 of Israel's closest allies have gone completely silent in the last 48 hours. Netanyahu is not just losing control, he is watching his entire strategic architecture collapse in real time while a NATO member state points a weapon at Tel Aviv that could level the entire city in 12 bombs. 6 months ago, Benjamin Netanyahu stood before the Israeli parliament and promised the complete dismantling of Hamas. The plan was to conduct a swift surgical operation in Gaza that would eliminate the threat, restore Israeli security, and cement his legacy as the leader who finally solved the Palestinian problem. It was supposed to take weeks. He promised the international community that civilian casualties would be minimal. He assured his American backers that Israel would follow the laws of war. But the cost was not just the destruction of Gaza, it was the destruction of Israel's moral standing in the eyes of the world. Every day, images flooded social media, hospitals bombed, children pulled from rubble, aid workers killed. The death toll climbed past 35,000, then 40,000. The numbers became so staggering that even Israel's closest allies began to question what they were witnessing. The international community protested. The United Nations Security Council passed resolution after resolution. South Africa brought genocide charges to the International Criminal Court. Human rights organizations documented what they called systematic war crimes. But Netanyahu dismissed every objection. He called the protesters anti-Semitic. He said the casualty numbers were exaggerated. He assumed the West would eventually accept whatever Israel did because they always had before. Netanyahu gambled that American support would never waver, that European criticism would remain purely symbolic, and that regional powers would stay divided and ineffective. He assumed Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan was all talk and no action. He assumed the Islamic world would condemn but never coordinate. He assumed the global backlash would fade like it always does. He assumed wrong. At exactly 7:42 a.m. Ankara time this morning, Turkish state media broadcast footage that military experts say was designed to send one message and one message only. The video showed the Gazap thermobaric bomb mounted beneath the wings of an F-16 fighter jet. The weapon is 970 kilograms of compressed aerosol fuel designed to create a blast wave that reaches temperatures of 3,000 degrees Celsius. The explosion consumes all oxygen within a 90-meter radius underground, meaning it can collapse bunkers that were built to survive nuclear war. But this was just the beginning. While Turkish military television was broadcasting the weapon demonstration, Turkey's Ministry of Foreign Affairs was simultaneously releasing Communiqué number 70. The document, bearing official state letterhead, directly compared Benjamin Netanyahu to Adolf Hitler. Not in casual rhetoric, not in a tweet from a junior official. In an official diplomatic communication from the second largest army in NATO. At that exact same moment, Reuters reported that Turkey had quietly moved 3 squadrons of F-16s to its southern air bases, less than 500 kilometers from the Israeli coastline. Flight tracking data confirmed unusual military activity. Satellite imagery showed munitions being loaded, and sources inside the Turkish military, speaking on condition of anonymity, told Defense News that strike packages were being prepared. And most shockingly, while all of this was unfolding, the White House press secretary was asked directly about Turkey's actions and said only that the United States was monitoring the situation, not condemning, not warning, monitoring. That single word told everyone in the region exactly what they needed to know. America was not going to protect Netanyahu this time. Pause. The Israeli shekel immediately dropped 3.7% against the dollar. Oil futures spiked 11% in under an hour. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange saw its worst single-day decline since October 7, 2023. The markets do not care about rhetoric. They care about risk. And right now, the financial world is pricing in the possibility of a regional war that could shut down Middle Eastern oil production and drag NATO into a direct confrontation with one of its own members. According to leaks from sources inside the Israeli cabinet, an emergency meeting was convened at 4 a.m. Israel time. The participants included Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Mossad Director David Barnea, and the heads of the Israeli Defense Forces. The topic was not whether Turkey was bluffing. The topic was what Israel could realistically do if Turkey was not. We have learned from senior Israeli military officials that the conversation was far more desperate than anything the public has been told. One source described the meeting as the moment Netanyahu realized he had painted Israel into a corner with no way out. According to the leaked account, Gallant opened the meeting with a blunt assessment. Prime Minister, if Turkey launches even a fraction of its air force with these weapons, our Iron Dome cannot stop them all. We are looking at casualties in the tens of thousands. Our bunker infrastructure will not save Tel Aviv. Netanyahu reportedly asked whether Israel could launch a preemptive strike on Turkish air bases. Mossad Director Barnea responded with a single question. And then what? Turkey invokes Article 5 of NATO. We are at war with the entire Atlantic Alliance. Or they do not invoke Article 5, which means NATO dissolves and we face Turkey, Iran, and every Arab state simultaneously with no Western backing. It was a cold, calculated realization. They looked at the crisis in Gaza, which had already killed over 40,000 Palestinians and destroyed Israel's international legitimacy. They looked at the arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court that made Netanyahu a wanted man in over 100 countries. They looked at the fractures inside Israel's own government as coalition partners began jumping ship to save their political careers. They realized Netanyahu had become a liability not just to his party, but to the survival of the state itself. The decision was not made in that room, but the recognition was Netanyahu had lost the room. And when a leader loses the room in a bunker meeting at 4 a.m, the collapse is already underway. Why did Turkey do this? Follow the power. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is not just the president of Turkey. He is a leader who has spent 2 decades rebuilding Turkey's influence in the Muslim world after a century of secular isolation. But Erdogan wanted to be the leader who united the Islamic world against Israeli aggression, not the leader who watched from the sidelines while Gaza burned. Sources close to the Turkish government say Erdogan and Netanyahu had multiple back-channel communications over the past 6 months. The message from Ankara was consistent: end the Gaza operation, accept a ceasefire, stop the civilian casualties. But Netanyahu believed Turkey needed Israel more than Israel needed Turkey. He believed Erdogan was constrained by NATO membership and economic ties to the West. He believed the threats were empty. This shifts power from Netanyahu to Erdogan in a way that is irreversible. Netanyahu can no longer control the narrative that Israel is the victim defending itself against terrorism. He is now the protagonist in a story where a NATO member state is threatening to use weapons of mass destruction against Israeli cities. When Turkey, a country that has maintained diplomatic and economic relations with Israel for decades, issues an official statement comparing you to Hitler and shows the world the weapon they built to destroy your bunkers, that signals you have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. What historians will call the Netanyahu doctrine, the belief that Israel could act with complete impunity as long as it had American support, died this morning in Ankara. This is not a minor diplomatic dispute. This is the moment the regional order fundamentally changed. The legal ramifications are catastrophic. The International Criminal Court has already issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Those warrants, which seemed symbolic when they were issued, have now become leverage. If Netanyahu travels to any of the 123 countries that recognize ICC jurisdiction, he can be arrested and extradited to The Hague. This is not a future threat. This is current reality. But here is what makes this different. Turkey is not some small country with no military power. Turkey controls the Bosporus Strait. Turkey has the second largest military in NATO. Turkey has access to both Western military technology and increasingly close ties to Russia and China. If Turkey decides to close its airspace to Israeli jets or block Israeli shipping through the straits, Israel loses critical strategic mobility, and there is nothing Netanyahu can do about it without triggering a war he cannot win. Here is the domino effect. If Turkey follows through on even a symbolic military action against Israel, then Iran sees an opportunity. If Iran sees an opportunity, then Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen escalate. If they escalate, then the entire region destabilizes. If the region destabilizes, then global oil markets collapse. If oil markets collapse, then the world economy enters a recession. We are looking at a crisis that makes the 1970s oil embargo look like a minor inconvenience. Saudi Arabia is watching this closely. They see Turkey taking the lead on defending Palestinian rights while they have quietly normalized relations with Israel. The pressure on Mohammed bin Salman from his own population and from the broader Muslim world is building. Egypt is watching. Jordan is watching. The United Arab Emirates is watching. Every Arab leader who made peace with Israel is now calculating whether that peace is worth the domestic political cost. Where is Joe Biden? Silence. Where is the European Union? Vague statements about de-escalation. Where are the British? Monitoring the situation. Why? Because they are distancing themselves. They are positioning themselves to say they warned Netanyahu privately. They are preparing to let him fall because saving him would cost them more than losing him. This creates a split in the Israeli coalition that cannot be healed. On one side, you have the far-right members of Netanyahu's government who want to escalate further, who believe showing weakness now would be catastrophic. On the other side, you have the moderate members who see the writing on the wall and are privately telling journalists that Netanyahu has led Israel into a trap. A divided Israel cannot negotiate its way out of this crisis. A divided Israel cannot present a unified deterrent to Turkey or Iran. A divided Israel is a vulnerable Israel. Reports from sources inside Netanyahu's inner circle describe a man who is increasingly isolated. He is sleeping 3 hours a night. He is obsessed with media coverage. He keeps asking his aides the same question over and over. Why won't they support us? Why won't America say something? He is experiencing what psychologists would call a break from reality. He built his entire career on the assumption that Israel could do anything as long as it had American backing. That assumption no longer holds. And he cannot process the new reality. Staff are reportedly limiting who has access to him because his emotional state is becoming a security risk. He is not making decisions, he is reacting. And in a crisis of this magnitude, reaction without strategy is how nations collapse. The image of those Turkish F-16s circling over Ankara is not just a military demonstration. It is a symbol of the end of an era. It represents the moment when the regional balance of power shifted away from Israel and toward a coalition of Muslim-majority nations willing to use force to defend Palestinian civilians. Netanyahu wanted to be remembered as the leader who secured Israel's future. He will be remembered as the leader who destroyed its diplomatic foundation. You can manipulate public opinion with sophisticated media campaigns. You can spin casualty numbers. You can control the narrative inside your own country, but you cannot manipulate the laws of geopolitics. You cannot spin your way out of a thermobaric bomb. You cannot control the narrative when a NATO member is threatening to level your capital city. The ultimate truth is this: power requires legitimacy, and legitimacy requires restraint. Netanyahu chose maximum force. He chose to ignore international law. He chose to believe that might makes right, and now he is discovering that might without legitimacy is just violence. And violence, when it becomes too extreme, turns your allies into spectators and your neighbors into enemies. So, where are we? Netanyahu is in his residence in Jerusalem. The International Criminal Court has issued a warrant for his arrest. His coalition is fracturing. Turkey has demonstrated a weapon specifically designed to destroy Israeli bunker infrastructure and has moved fighter jets into striking range. Iran is coordinating with Turkey for the first time in decades. Arab states that normalized relations with Israel are quietly reconsidering. America has gone silent. Europe is hedging. The financial markets are pricing in catastrophe. He is simultaneously the Prime Minister of Israel and the most isolated leader in the democratic world. He holds the highest office in his nation and yet has less power than he did 6 months ago. As we head into the next 72 hours, expect desperation. Netanyahu will try to force America's hand by creating a crisis that demands intervention. He might try to strike Iranian nuclear facilities to change the subject. He might try to escalate in Lebanon to justify a broader conflict. He could even try to declare a national emergency and suspend elections to avoid losing power. But here is what cannot be undone. The regional order has shifted. Turkey has demonstrated that it is willing to threaten military force against Israel. Muslim-majority nations have seen that the West will not automatically defend Israeli actions. When that precedent is set, when that line is crossed, there is no going back to the old arrangements. Subscribe. We will be monitoring Netanyahu's next moves over the next 48 hours. If he attempts any military escalation, if Turkey moves additional forces to the border, if Iran makes any coordinated statement with Ankara, we will break it down in real time. This is not just a regional crisis. This is the moment the post-World War II order in the Middle East began to collapse. The foundation is shattered. The legitimacy is gone. When a leader loses legitimacy, they cannot rebuild it with force. They can only watch as the structure they built crumbles around them. Watch closely.